on?
How you doing? I look like shit.
Open the door.
No.
Yes.
No.
Please.
Lies all the time.
Who's this guy?
I don't know.
Did you get your pants on?
No.
Your t-shirt's on the wrong way.
I know, they're always on the wrong way. I'm a huge fan of Humphrey Bogart, you know, the lead actor in film noir, as far as he and Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, all the great actors of that kind. We don't have anybody like that anymore. Well, I wanted to be one of those guys. You know, I wanted to be as tough as they were and as nasty as they were, and this film allowed me to do that. You know, especially after I got bitten by a gorgeous vampire lady, Serena, and yeah.
Vera.
Vera bit me on the neck.
Oh my God, it was Vera. Vera bit me.
Like a lot of young people, I came out to Hollywood looking for the Hollywood dream. In 1978, I drove out from Dallas, Texas with my father in a red Camaro. The first night we stayed in a funky motel on Hollywood Boulevard full of pimps and hookers. It was a different time then. 6 years later, in 1984, I'd be directing my first feature film. I had no idea what I was getting into. All I knew is that I wanted to direct a movie. What I didn't know then is that it would take me 30 years to finish it. When I first moved out here, I stayed at this apartment on Franklin and Gower, a one-room studio apartment with a pull-down Murphy bed. So I studied at a place called Sherwood Oaks Experimental Film School, right there. And back in those days, they had great professionals who took their time to teach, like Robert Easton and Clu Gallagher and William Friedkin. True professionals in the business. It was an amazing film school back in '78. This is how we used to communicate. We'd actually have to go to the phone, find a payphone, put a quarter in it, and make a call.
The scene on the street in Hollywood in the late 70s and early 80s was incredible, and it really has never been like that since, where people were like falling out of clubs and hanging out on streets. And at that time, I think it was punk and then new wave. And it was really exciting because you could just connect with people and meet new people, and things were going on, and there was a lot of energy.
And the 80s in Los Angeles was very punk, was very hip. And, you know, we were heading into new wave. It's where I think perhaps the two genres of dark seduction come together to form a genre.
So after film school, they came out with a Panasonic low-light VHS consumer-friendly camera, and I got one. So my friend and I, David Daniels, started making short videos, little comedy videos, little comedy sketches around 82, 83. So in 83, I made one called Home Life, and that's where I met Steve Bouchard for the first time. He was the director of photography on it. So we got to talking after this video, and he was telling me about this film that he wanted to make with female vampires. And a little while later, he wanted to meet with me and discuss the idea with me.
So this little park used to be a little mini mall, and there was a liquor store and an Italian restaurant there, and this is where we had our second meeting. And Steve Bouchard and brought his friend Tim Studley, who was gonna camera assist and gaff and everything, and Steve wanted to produce it and shoot it. And these guys were kind of laid-back California guys and a little disorganized, and so he needed help with direction, and that's where I came in.
Did I want to direct this movie? I don't know. I like the idea of a tough, hard-boiled detective, and of course, who doesn't like lesbian vampires? But to be perfectly honest, I wanted to direct a feature film and I really didn't care what it was about. So I said yes, signed up, signed on, and never looked back.
So back in 1984, this was our production office at the old Outpost building. Now this is a famous lobby. It's been in hundreds of movies. And this is where Steve Bouchard first got his production office that we used for Dark Seduction. Come on, let's take a look at it. At nighttime, this place was really creepy because it was so low lit. Look at this old stairwell from the 30s, I guess it might go back to. So this is the hallway in the same Outpost building where we shot the Murdoch tracking shot as he walks down the long hallway to see Jones. And now this was our office. This is where we put the Dick Jones sign, and it was Dick Jones' office in the movie as well. We shot in it. Now, the first night that Steve Bouchard wanted to meet with me for this movie, I came down here about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and he said, meet me in my office. Well, the very first night, he didn't show up. So I stood around here for about 30 minutes waiting for him. Finally figured out he didn't know about it or forgot about it. So anyway, this is where it all happened, in this production office.
So let me go back. I started doing audition night at the Comedy Store in the Improv. And while I was going to film school, I built a stand-up comedy act. So in the coming weeks, we started casting the movie. I brought in my sister to play Laura. Catherine Simmons walked in the office and blew us away, so we cast her as Serena, Ron Brown as the cook, and Joe Alaskey to play the fat man. Joe Alaskey, I knew a lot of comedians and a lot of comedic actors through my stand-up. So I brought in Tyler Horn as Dick Jones and Mark Goldstein as the producer, Robert Schimmel, Julie Brown, brought her in to play the nurse, Tracy Conway to play the nurse at the inn, and Arvid Holmberg, and we brought him in to play the creepy butler at the Fat Man's Mansion. Also, the next door neighbor in our office was King Ricardo King, and we cast him as the King.
How's it going, King?
Everything is everything. What's on your mind, Jones?
So I asked Vicky Huey to play the role of Vera.
Summer of 1984. Greg Travis called me and he said, hey, I'm doing this movie. Can you come out to LA? Do you want to be in it? And I was like, well, sure.
She was perfect for it.
What's it about? It's about vampires. It's like, okay. And a film noir detective. Okay. Oh, and by the way, you're lesbian. Okay, let's do this.
And she was married to my best friend, David Daniel. They were both living in New York at the time, so she had to fly in to play the role. So Steve Bouchard brought in Tim Studley to help him with camera and lighting. We used different sound men on different days. And I brought in Monica DeVenti to do hair and makeup. And also she brought in Don White to do the art direction.
He was very creative, and I mentioned him to Greg, and he was the art director on Dark Seduction. He did all the still photos on Dark Seduction, he did a lot of the backdrops, he did the goddess headpiece. He even helped me when I needed help as far as doing body makeup, because I was doing 3 jobs.
We were finally ready to start rolling cameras.
So we shot at a lot of famous Hollywood locations, and of course the Improv being one, since I worked there. Bud Friedman was nice enough to let me shoot at the bar and a couple of other places.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
This is Big Ed's bar in Culver City. It's where we shot the Fast Eddie scene. It's also the same bar they shot the movie Barfly in, about Bukowski. Now it's a pizza place.
So this is the site of the world-famous rock and roll motel, the Tropicana. It was right here. And this is where we shot the Dick Jones-Vera meeting at the motel. This was a famous crash motel of Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison and Tom Waits, Chucky Weiss. A lot of big rock stars stayed, and some of them even lived here. Of course, it's a Ramada Inn now. They tore it down a long time ago. But back in the 80s, this was the Rock and Roll Motel, and this was one of our locations. This was a hot, steamy scene that we shot there, the love scene between Dick Jones and Vera. And I remember looking around the room at one point, it got so hot and steamy while we were shooting it that every one of the crew in the room had an erection.
We did everything short of actually having sex. And everybody in the room was going, yeah, that's good, that's great, that's all right, Tyler, yeah, okay.
So one day on location, we were needing a car for Dick Jones to drive, and at this gas station, a perfect late 30s or early 40s little convertible pulled up, and the guy was just tooling around town, so I offered him $100 if we could use his car to shoot for our movie. And we ended up using it, and we shot around Beverly Hills, all the shots of Dick Jones driving over to the mansion. We got pulled over, I remember, in Beverly Hills because we were shooting the car behind us.
And of course, we hear a siren, and a police car comes and pulls us over. Greg, who was driving, jumps out of the car, and the cop, this is like a Beverly Hills cop, pulls out a gun and says, "Sir, get back in the car."
He was a little intimidated by the way I jumped out of the car or something. I remember I got in trouble with a cop.
Greg gets back in the car, and we're like, "You don't ever jump out of a car when you get pulled over. Didn't anybody ever tell you that?" And yeah, he was a smooth talker, though. We didn't get a ticket.
When we filmed Dick Jones in front of the Taft Building, we didn't have a permit to shoot on Hollywood Boulevard. And just as we were all set up, a policeman came by and started to ask me if we had a permit. And before he could say that, I said, "Oh my God, we just need to get this one shot. Can you help us stop traffic so we can get it?" And he said, "Sure." And so the cop stopped all this traffic on Hollywood Boulevard so we could get Dick Jones standing in the middle of the street in front of the Taft Building. And there it is, still there. So this is where we shot the exterior of the occult shop where Dick Jones goes to see Nastasia, the bad tooth fairy. And of course the facade has changed now, but this used to be a glass storefront with a big occult shop in the window.
Sorry, we're closed.
The door was open.
We're closed.
I need a few things.
I said we're closed.
So this is where we shot the hotel scene where Dick Jones turns into a vampire. And this hotel was also used in Pretty Woman, where Richard Gere climbs up the scaffolding to see her at the end of the movie. I think it's the same front of the hotel.
We shot in a studio for about a week. We built the vampire lair set, the occult shop set, and we shot all the dream sequence stuff there with coffins and blood and all sorts of special effects shots. Steve also found a special effects house, and we built a castle model, and he shot the castle in 35mm color that was later transferred to 16 black and white. So I was living at the Genesee apartment right off Melrose, which was a hip, trendy street at the time, and had just started up with all the new shops. And we shot a lot of stuff in my apartment. I think we kept doing little pickup shots there for at least a year. We shot the Ray's scene there, which was my character, and Miko, that was all in my apartment, a huge fight scene. We shot the tunnel scene where we lined trash bags through my hallway, and the Dick Jones going into the Vampire World tunnel. We shot a lot of little claymation things, special effects things. We shot in the splatter room, which was the second bedroom I had, which I'd splattered the paint all over the walls. We shot the rat office in that room. The vampires in their car. We put trash bags on the outside of the windows and shot them in front of the apartment building there. We shot the moon goddess scene in the apartment underneath my apartment.
Back here, we shot the alley and the chase scene where Dick Jones is running after Serena. One of King's scenes was also in the back. This was where the fight scene took place. Remember this garage? They replaced it. And up against this wall here, this whole area was the big fight scene between Jones and Serena at the end. And that was my bedroom window.
I played
Punk Ninja in Dark Seduction.
And I played German Punk in Dark Seduction.
We were the two guardians out in front of the Pussy Willow Club, and we had to stop any males from getting in.
I knew we had to stop Dick Jones, but I didn't.
We had to stop any male, but Dick Jones was pretty much that extra chromosome male. We really had to stop him.
With a name like Dick Jones.
You better stop him.
Yeah, I better stop him.
Stop him at the door.
When Overton and I would leave the set and get high, we would blaze up off set and go, Rick, we got to do a fight scene. Well, okay, Tyler, fine, we'll do a fight scene. I'd say, but I think you're tougher than I am. He went, no, I'm not.
It was really fun to do, though.
It was. And I was very impressed with you because you showed up with your own ninja outfit.
I thought I cut the hood so we could stick the mohawk
was
rubber
inspired.
thing through there.
He had a ninja hood, but he put a mohawk on it, so it was like punk ninja, so we got...
It was really sweaty, that rubber thing there. It was great.
Good job. Good job.
It was the truest sense an indie project when all the majors were doing major things. And that's my first real indie film that I ever did in my life was Dark Seduction.
An experience I will never forget.
And I've done a lot since, and I think I cut my teeth on knowing how it all works.
Everybody involved in the project was passionate.
Maybe the most of all on that film. It was really fun.
It was during, somewhere before the Butt Cherries, I think, that we did Dark Seduction.
I'm gonna bat my lashes. I'm gonna perform. Say, here, kitty, kitty.
I guess my mood while performing was very cattish, like that. I had never performed the cat song. I had done it sometimes with the backing track at other events. I just thought it was perfect for the film, and it seemed to work. Melissa was a friend of mine. She got the other dancer, and I don't remember her name. Well, because the track was pre-recorded, I really sang to the track, so I would love to say that I wrote it for the film, but that wasn't how it happened.
Yeah. Excited. You make me scratch. You make me scratch. Relax.
Vicky and Catherine, I think, worked beautifully together as the vampire couple. All the women at the Pussy Willow looked fantastic. That was a big background day, and I was the only one taking care of them all, coordinating, and it worked out beautifully. During that time, the 80s, makeup was really, really intense anyway. So a lot of the makeup, as you will see, it's almost like an opera makeup. So I had the opportunity to have some pretty women to work with to add some looks to my portfolio back then. Stacy, Vicky, Hisako, Julie, who was in the Pussy Willow Club. I also think that the art direction, sets, and everything else look fantastic also. When we weren't working, we were still doing art. This is a photograph that Donald took of me on the set. And Vicky lived with me for a while, which was great. We had a great time together.
I decided to leave New York City and move out to LA, and I moved in with Monica, and we became really good friends.
And I used to actually take photos of her when she was sleeping or on the phone, because she was just so beautiful.
That was a really wonderful little gift that I got from the movie.
We went into the studio with Steve Bishart for the dream sequence. We did the makeup and the blood work in there. I was even in one of the scenes, hanging up, screaming, with blood on me. So I don't know how I had time to do all that, but I did.
Hollywood, 1944. Private Detective Jig Jones finds himself tracking a vampire, a 1984 vampire. It's a 40s, 80s time shift. Serena is a 5,000-year-old vampire with her young and curious partner, Vera. They're a deadly combination, a force to be reckoned with. But at this particular time, their relationship is choppy. Enter Dick Jones. A one-night stand with Vera triggers a tailspin that leads to big trouble.
So we finished shooting for the most part in about 12 days. And I had to go back out on the road and do stand-up and make a living. Steve took all the footage and transferred the sound to Mag and started syncing up everything on the Moviola and a little flatbed we had in his little office. So about a month later, we had this huge rap party at my Genesee apartment. I mean, it was off the hook. Everybody came. We had coke, tons of pot, booze, there were fights, the cops showed up. Oh my God, it was unbelievable. It went on all night long.
The guy who played Murdoch, heavy-set guy, was hitting on my girlfriend.
I remember talking to this rather appealing young lady.
I am gonna have to correct that young man's behavior.
He came back out, and he didn't care for that.
You know, Murdoch, I came with her, and I'm gonna leave with her, he said.
We had some words.
I said, she's my girlfriend, and if you make one more move in her direction, I'm either gonna bury your ass on this carpet.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Drag you outside and kick your head until it looks like a muskmelon.
Sure, I think I diffused it.
You got it? And he went,
As much as I like the company of women and engaging them in conversation, I usually am a pretty good boy when they come with an escort, especially when it's like a co-star.
If you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm gonna blow you away.
Slowly but surely, we started to assemble a rough cut, and I would work on it at night sometimes and throw everything out of sync, and the next day, Steve would sync it all back up again, but little by little, we got a rough cut. So we kept editing for a while, trying to get it all into shape, and we decided to have a screening of the rough cut at PhotoChem, so we invited all of our friends to come check it out. And they didn't know what to make of it.
I can play hard sometimes. Say about
Listen,
myself.
pal.
No, please.
Well, when are you going to show us this palace of yours, Patsy?
Well, there's no time better than the present, you know,
And it was a very wide cut with just a very sparse temp track, music track on it, and it didn't play very well, and it was very clunky, and the ending was awful.
No!
Sorry, baby.
They just sort of smiled and slowly walked out. I got depressed. So after editing for a while, I realized we were coming up short. We needed a few more scenes with the detective to help round out his character and his backstory. So that we went back about 6 months later and shot the mansion scene with the fat man and Laura.
I played Laura, who had been married and had been Dick Jones's secretary for 5 years. And we don't really know a lot about her backstory before those 5 years. I'm guessing, like a lot of people, she moved to Los Angeles and fell into somehow meeting Dick Jones. Then they split up because he was drinking too much, and, you know, probably many years of threatening, she finally made good on it and left, and then found herself somehow in this house with this wealthy, large man, and he is her new boyfriend, and Dick Jones shows up to try to win me back. But I don't think she's having much of it.
Oh, you keep bringing up the past. I was your wife, your secretary, and your mother for 5 years. I think we're even.
And I wanted to get Laura back, and Laura was under his spell for some reason or another. She was inured to the fat man. Well, he had money. I didn't know he was a detective. Detectives never have money. They're like comics, they never have money.
And also we shot the Murdoch-Jones car scene.
Today's a good day to die, isn't it? As they used to say in the Indian movies. John Wayne, Steve Allen, Carol Shelby, who I count as a personal friend. Murdoch is kind of a old school street detective, you know, runs a tough squad room, wears a trench coat and a fedora even on a 95-degree Angelino day. Dick Jones and I go way back. We work together. He's a hell of a cop, hell of a partner, hell of a friend. He just marches to his own drum, and basically I use him when I need him.
The press is making a circus out of this thing, Jones. Some mayor's on my back. I need a suspect.
I need a drink.
So not long after this screening, we lost the office on Hollywood Boulevard. The manager was killed by a transient.
Bill Kuzer, who was the manager of the building, was a little bit too friendly with too many different people, and I think a little bit too trusting. And later on, at some point in time, somebody did come into his place, whether he let them in or whatever, and he was stabbed, and unfortunately, he was killed.
So Steve moved all the equipment and rented a flatbed and moved everything into his second bedroom at his apartment in Studio City and continued to work on the edit and the music and the sound. And we tried to shape the film into something, but it was slow going and it just still wasn't working. I got a job on SNL doing short films, so I moved to New York and worked there for a while. And when I got back, I found that not much work had been done, and Steve sort of lost interest in it, and I lost interest in it, and moved on to other things and went back on the road, and it sort of sat there for a year or two, collecting dust and not really going anywhere.
So in the early 90s, I made a deal with Steve Bouchard to get all of the footage back and see if I could finish the film. And I got an office from Chris LaPlue to do the editing, and I hired Guy Pullman to be the editor. And it's in this building that our office was in. And I think it was around the 4th floor. It was all the way down here. And of course they've remodeled it, but it was an old Hollywood office building then. But basically we had a flatbed and a steam deck and a moviola to work with. And it was here that we did the final cut. And I was paying him with my unemployment checks at the time, and we spent at least 2 or 3 months cutting in this little office. Right back there.
And there was an energy push for this film, and we looked at it one day, and I looked at the film and I said, look at the perfs, they're all damaged, and the cut has been handled by several different editors over the years. And let's finally, let's get down to it.
And it's around that time that I found the Post Sound House. So let me go back. Let's talk about working with Guy Pullman a little bit.
We had a good relationship, the director and I.
And worked very well together. Guy was a great individual and actually a very good editor. And
we tried certain things, and he would say, let's let this section breathe here because the music will take it into another section.
I would be in one room finding little bits and pieces of film and
disassembling and assembling.
He would be working the flatbed
and viewing.
We finally got the film into what I consider to be pretty good shape.
The edit was considered a good edit.
And got very close to the final cut. We had finalized the cut.
All right, Joey, cut the jam. So when it came time to do the post-production sound, I heard about this new post-production facility called Cube Post that was using a brand new technology, a new program called Pro Tools.
To be the very first all-digital audio post-production house.
And it was much cheaper than all the other sound houses, so I made a deal to do the sound with Cube Post.
The house had belonged to Rudolph Valentino, and it was within walking distance of the studio on La Brea. So apparently Valentino would use this house just to come back and have a little bit of afternoon delight.
This was brand new technology, the Pro Tools, and what we had to do is transfer the film over to 3/4 tape.
With time code, but tape is 30 frames per second and film is 24 frames per second, so I didn't know how it was all going to sync up.
Getting the computer to speak to the machine that was running the magnetic tape was a nightmare.
So it's all quite complicated and very new.
And Pro Tools wasn't at that time designed to do feature film mixing. It was designed to do 8 or 16 track music recording. But they were running about 99 tracks. And they had all these old drives. Well, they were brand new at the time, but now we look back at them as strange sort of monsters from antiquity. Huge drives, each with maybe half a gigabyte, not even 250 megabytes each. And they were stacked in the back room and daisy chained together, and there was wires everywhere. And then we had the monitor, and we had the computer, which was pretty much smoking. It was so hot.
So at Cube Post, they did the dialogue editing.
Kind of smoothing it out.
They did the Foley track, which was all the noises. They did sound effects. They did ambient sounds.
So this new system, we could cut within 1/100th of a frame.
So we were all ready to mix.
I think it started a mix in the room that Valentino entertained his young ladies in.
But I'd yet to hire a negative cutter, and I found a gentleman by the name of Dave Patmeyer, who was an expert Hollywood negative cutter. And I made a deal with Dave to cut our negative. And that's this. And what they do is wear white gloves, and they match the pristine negative of the film to the cut work print of the film. And that will be your final version. And then I went back on the road and let Dave cut our negative.
So after I got back from the road, I stopped by Cube to see how the mix was going, what was going on, and they had closed down. They completely went out of business, and I was told that all of my sound was in a box in this garage. And I found it. It was all in a box in the garage, and all of my soundtracks was on a little 8mm data storage tape.
The company that had built Pro Tools specifically for home studio musicians kind of went, wait a minute, we can sell this to the film industry. And the day we knew this was happening, Universal Studios bought 40 Pro Tools stations. And at that point, the old traditional style of editing was gone.
So looking back on it all, this was the closest I had come to getting it finished, and I should have kept pushing and finished it then in the early 90s, but I had been stopped cold in my tracks with this sound and this exabyte tape. And I just ran out of time and energy and the wherewithal to keep pushing. So I let it lay. I let it lay for a while. A long while.
Well, the character of King, but it was that kind of guy, streetwise guy, smart alecky guy in a way, but kind of sharp and street cool, you know. And so I looked at that particular part of the script and I said, that's cool, I like that. Well, me being a guy from the ghetto, if you will, I know the energy of the ghetto. Had to do with nostalgia and had to do with that old type of energy that it had in the film, which I thought was interesting too. I mean, you go back with these detectives of old and that kind of thing. So that fit.
Say, girls, what do you want, King?
So in 2003, I made a movie called Night Creep, a psychological horror film about a stripper who moves into an apartment and her creepy landlord comes to visit her at night in her room. Very mysterious. But in the post-production of that film, my sound editor, Mike, was able to open the Dark Seduction data storage tape and put all the sound on a hard drive. Unfortunately, Mike disappeared, and the hard drive disappeared with him. I never saw him or the drive again. So it was somewhere near this time that I tried to get in touch with Dave Patmeyer about the negative cut, and I called him, but his office phones were dead. So I went by the office, but no one was there. He was gone. The office was cleared out. I checked with all the other offices around, but no one was there either. They were all vacant. Where did Dave go? He has my negative. What the hell? So now at this point, my negative was gone, work print was gone, all the sound on the hard drive was gone, and I had no more money to put into it. It was at this point that I just completely lost faith in ever finishing this film. I didn't care anymore, and I decided to just move on.
So after the film, I was just curious as to when it was all going to be finished, edited, and ready to see.
I think at first, the first few years, it was, you know, what's going on with that? What's happening with that? Can I have a scene for my reel?
How's it going? And we're doing this, we're doing that, we still have some things to shoot.
Well, I was wondering what was happening with the movie, but it's always, well, we're having trouble with this post-production, that post-production, this and that. And going, well, let me know when it's done.
It took a long time, like a lot of indie films.
You know, these things went on for several months to several years.
I called Travis from time to time, but we weren't in really close contact back then.
And then I heard later on, much later on, that he had an editor that somehow had a health issue, and the footage was lost.
He, I think, had quite a journey.
Now we cut to 2012, and I made another film called Midlife, about a middle-aged salesman down on his luck in need of a life change. And it was during the post-production of this film that I realized I had another film laying around, Dark Seduction, that had yet to be finished. But where was it? So one sleepless night at 4 in the morning, I leaped out of bed and got on the computer. I had to track down my film. I had to track down Dave Patmeyer and get my film back. He had my negative and my work print, and I had no idea where he was. I finally played cyber detective and found his daughter. And she said Dave had had a stroke and couldn't walk or talk anymore and couldn't get around too well, so he couldn't tell us where it was. Perhaps he didn't know. She didn't know. She thought it might be in their garage at his home, but they looked and they couldn't find it. So later I talked to Dave's son-in-law, and he was a very nice gentleman, and he agreed to look for it once again and said that they looked all through the house and all through the garage, but they still couldn't find the work print or the negative. And I was just sick at my stomach, and I wanted to pull my hair out. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I knew it was my own damn fault for my own neglect and having let it go as long as it did. Quite a while later, I called my psychic friend, Tana Marie Richards, and I was just talking about all kinds of things, and I mentioned it to her. I said, you know, I'm really sick that they can't find Dark Seduction. And I asked her, I said, do you think it's lost forever? And she said, no. It's in a little cabinet in the corner of the garage, in the bottom of the cabinet. And I got really excited. I said, oh, Tana, I hope you're right. The next day, I called the son-in-law, and I asked him to look one more time. I said, will you please look in the garage, in the corner of the garage, in a cabinet, and look in the bottom of the cabinet? He resisted at first. He said, we've searched the house. We've searched the garage. Your film is not there. I said, please, I begged him to look one more time in this specific place. And about a week later, I got a call from the son-in-law. He said, we found your film. It was in the cabinet, in the bottom drawer, in the corner of the garage. And he took it to his grocery store where he worked the next day. On a Monday morning, I met him there, and I got my negative and my work print back intact. we were back in business.
When I did get some notification later on that the film had been located to some degree, they had found the missing pieces to it, and that they were working on it.
Well, the film gods had been good to me. They gave me my long-lost Dark Seduction back. And now I had to appease the film gods and actually finish it. But now I could taste it. It was in reach.
So I started an Indiegogo campaign to raise money to transfer the negative. Now, I knew I couldn't make a film print of the negative, but I could transfer the negative itself to a 2K digital print.
Because he'd originated on film, suddenly he had to go to 2K or 4K in order to get something that was releasable.
And that's exactly what we did. We raised enough money to accomplish that feat. I found a lab that made me a great deal on the transfer, and we did it. So we raised the money, made the transfer, got it all put on a hard drive. I started looking at it, and I noticed that the last 10 minutes of the film were not on the hard drive. They had not been transferred. I called the lab. They didn't know anything about it. Finally, I opened the negative can and looked at it, and there was a note from Dave Papmeyer that said the last 10 minutes had not been completed. Dave had not cut the last 10 minutes of the negative. So now I had to find a negative cutter to finish it. The only problem is there are no more negative cutters. They don't exist. They're obsolete. Nowadays, they transfer the negative straight to a digital print when it comes right out of the gate. I called PhotoChem and tried to find some negative cutters through them. They suggested a few names. I called them up, but they only cut 35mm negative and not 16. I finally found a little old lady that lives in Valencia who was a negative cutter who cut 16mm. She miraculously cut the last 10 minutes.
Hello, I'm Rob Ryder, sound editor, re-recording mixer, and also score composer for Dark Seduction.
I needed a new soundtrack. The original soundtrack was now 20 years old and was dated.
We had talked about the score for a little while before we actually started to record. Greg actually at this point had not shown me the film. He had just talked to me about it.
He volunteered for the job and agreed to do it.
It was the first film that I've actually done most of the music before watching anything.
Was that okay?
Andy Fuhr and I, we have a rehearsal space where we have drum kit and a mixer and guitars and bass amps, guitar amps, things hanging from the ceiling. It's sort of like a jungle in there of audio equipment. And we go in there for hours at a time and create madness and whatnot. And Greg was like, hey, I want to record it for this film. You know, I've got these different cues, and he had actually had everything all cued out.
So during the 6 months before we finished the film, he had been chipping away with live instrumentations and live musicians, recording a great new soundtrack for Dark Seduction.
So we did a bulk of the vampire theme and a lot of the sort of more esoteric Blade Runner-esque sounds with what's called the Polyevolver. The Polyevolver was created by Dave Smith Instruments just a few years ago. It's not very old, but he was the original person that was responsible for the synthesizers that were used to create the Blade Runner sounds.
Now, while all this was going on, I was on another quest, which was to get my original soundtrack back, which was all stored on this 8mm data storage tape.
And this entailed a Foley job, some sound design, and a dialogue edit. And he's like, oh yeah, most of the work's already done. It's just on this digital storage tape.
Which no one could open.
He had a major problem.
It was on some sort of an exabyte program, which no one seemed to know about, which was completely obsolete.
Exabyte hadn't been used, I don't know, since 1999.
I called Germany. They didn't know what to do. I called England and France. They were confused. I called every major post house in the country, and no one seemed to be able to open it. I took the tape to every big post house in Los Angeles, Hollywood, California, USA. They couldn't open it and didn't have a clue as to what to do.
I knew one guy that might have one, and it turned out he'd sold it years ago. I mean, at the time, it was horribly expensive. If you had an exabyte machine, it was like, oh my God, we got exabyte. We're good for the next 400 years. But basically, we were good for the next 4.5 weeks.
Finally, I found a guy named John Davis who was a sound expert in Hollywood. He knew a guy who knew a guy named Mike. And Mike worked at the History of Recorded Sound over in Culver City on Washington. And God bless his soul, he was finally able to open this tape and transfer it over to a hard drive.
So Greg then gives me the telecine, film version that he had, and I bring it into my Pro Tools setup, and I put it up against the audio, and it doesn't sync up.
Try to paint a mental picture in your mind. Use your imaginations.
That right there was the problem, because film was being shot at 24 frames per second, and video ran at 29.97 frames per second in the US, and 25 frames per second in Europe. I won't even get into France and Saudi Arabia or whatever.
No matter what we did, we tried it at different speeds. Robert tried everything he could think of. The sound wouldn't sync up. I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do.
So I didn't know, but there was actually a device that was in between the Pro Tools system and the film playback system, to where it would do a frame rate conversion so that the digital system could actually sync up to the film, because there's no 23.98 frames per second on a film. I mean, there's 24 frames per second.
Finally, I called another post-production expert, and he gave us a suggestion.
He actually showed me a screenshot of some settings to try and a crazy exporting sort of, scheme, and it worked.
It worked.
A mental picture in your mind. Use your imaginations. Let them run wild.
So the final film version of the Dark Seduction movie was put into the computer. So I ended up tightening everything up. I cut about 10 minutes out of it, rearranged a few scenes, just basically did a tightening job on the overall edit. Took about 6 months to do the sound mix. We got that back. And Michael and I rendered everything to the final, completed version and finalized and immortalized the movie that couldn't be finished for 30 years, the one and only Dark Seduction. Excited to be here at the New Art Theater, which is the theater that the first midnight movie was shown at, which was Rocky Horror Picture Show in 1975. Then came Pink Flamingos, and then came Eraserhead in 1977. And that's what I saw here, and that's what made me want to make a midnight movie.
It's a very classic film noir, but it's mixed with vampires.
Greg and I stayed in touch the whole time. We joked over the phone, and it's really fun and insane, and I remember goofing around on it 30-some years ago.
We were such a motley crew, and we were comics working together, actors hanging out, so to work with one of your peers was a blessing.
The backstory behind Dark Seduction is incredible. I never thought that we would get here, but we're here now.
It's an homage to film noir mixed with vampire genre, which no one had done when Greg did it.
You know, beat people up, shot people, got my butt kicked.
I'm just a big fan of Greg Travis, the director and writer. I've known Greg since we started out in stand-up comics back in the 80s.
Working with Greg was fantastic, creatively, everything as far as hair, makeup, and the wardrobe styling and design. I had a small part in it.
Black and white film, shadows, implied fear gives me the creeps.
My name's Steve Bouchard. I produced it and shot it. I realized it would be too dark if I did it just my way, and I had been working with Greg. My spooky trip that's all gloom and doom, and then Greg's whimsy. I knew it needed some of that rather than being, you know, like symbolic, but it is.
Do you guys know that the movie started in, what, 1984?
84. They shot it during the Olympics.
And they just finished it now.
When this movie was made, I was just 300 pounds.
I can't wait to see the film stock. I'm not even on camera. This guy's not even watching. Look, I'm way over here.
When Greg called me and told me this was going to happen, I had to come because I haven't seen some of these people in years.
Happily surprised to find out that it was all ready to roll and for everyone to see after all the fun we had.
As a young filmmaker, you could see this and go, well, it may take you many, many years, but you'll eventually finish the film. And I think that's inspiring to young filmmakers. But I haven't ever seen it on the big screen, so that's what I'm looking forward to.
It just was one of those crazy things where every time I would go back to finish it, something would go wrong and stop me. But there was always a little voice in the back of my head going, you've got to finish this movie, you've got to finish this movie. And so I never gave up on it, and I finally got it done. You know, share it as much as I possibly could with everybody. I think it's a cool little movie, and I hope it catches on as a midnight movie. This theater was where I originally saw Rocky Horror and also Eraserhead back in 1977. This theater is where midnight movies started in Los Angeles, and I'm so proud and happy to have it here. Thank you so much. Enjoy the movie. All right,